Hey y'all, so today I'm going to be doing the coffee book tag. I wasn't tagged by anyone, but I wanted to do a book tag and I was trying to figure out one and I was drinking coffee and I was like, oh yeah, there was a coffee book tag. So I looked it up and I liked the questions, so I decided to do it. And I can't remember who created this tag, so I will leave the original video down in the description. So the way this tag works is that there are 8 different forms of coffee and each one of them relates to a question about books. So let's just go ahead and jump into those questions. So question number 1 is black coffee. Name a series that's hard to get into but has hardcore fans. And for this one, I decided to go with Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, and as a point of reference, I decided to use The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. So I need to clarify this just a little bit. As of right now, I have completed 8 Brandon Sanderson books, and I have just started this one, so this one will be my 9th. And so far, I don't think any of the books themselves are hard to get into. This one is rather intimidating right now because it is so large and is the first book in a 10-book series, all of which will probably be like 1,000 pages long. So this one seems a little hard to get into right now since I'm only 40-ish pages in, and so far I'm still rather confused. But as a whole, all of the other Brandon Sanderson books that I've read have been very easy to read and to get into. However, last week I reviewed Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson, linked down in the description, and when I was doing some reading about the Cosmere, I got a little confused. I don't want to get into the Cosmere too much in this video because I don't think that I can explain it very well. But at this point, it just seems like this massive enigma, and I have no idea where any of it is going. So I think it's fairly easy to get into most of Brandon Sanderson's books, this one excluded currently because I'm still rather intimidated. But I think that understanding the Cosmere itself is something that's very difficult, and as I was reading, I saw that there are a lot of super hardcore Cosmere fans, and I didn't understand half of their conversations that they were having, and I've currently completed 4 books within the Cosmere, so I guess I'm not that far into his works, but still, I should have understood some of it, and I was almost completely in the dark. So question number 2 is Peppermint Mocha. Name a book that gets more popular during the winter or during the festive time of year. And quite honestly, the only book that I could think about for this was Harry Potter, given the Christmassy vibes that it seems to give everyone. So I decided to take it in a slightly different direction since Harry Potter is pretty obvious, and I decided to think more like Pumpkin Spice Latte and Halloween time, which seems a little bit silly on my part given that I don't like pumpkin spice lattes and I love peppermint mocha, but I just didn't want to be cliche and say Harry Potter and waste a slot that could be used talking about a different book. And so for a book that gets more popular during the creepy time of year or Halloween, I decided to go with The Diviners by Libba Bray. Anytime I go to talk about creepy books, it's the first thing that comes to mind. In a lot of creepy reads videos that I've seen, people have mentioned The Diviners. It just seems to be a book that a lot of people tend to think about or read during the Halloween time season. Question number 3 is hot chocolate. Name your favorite children's book. And once again, Harry Potter is the first thing that came to my mind, so I'm just going to push that aside and talk about some other children's books that I actually really enjoy. And fortunately, I'm home, so I actually have a ton of children's books that I really enjoyed sitting like at the back of my shelves, so I'll just go ahead and run through a few of them. So the first one I have here is The House on Hackman's Hill. This is one that I really enjoyed as a kid. It's a really creepy story about a mummy in a mansion, and it's really, really cool, but I never knew anyone who had read it, and I've never seen it talked about anywhere ever. I'm pretty sure it doesn't have that many reviews on Goodreads, but this is actually a really good creepy kids book if you have any kids out there who are really into creepy books. But yeah, legitimately creepy kids book. And then I also have a bunch of A to Z Mysteries books. This was my favorite series as a kid, and so I bought my favorite ones just to have on my shelf. Also, the Magic Tree House series. I have the 8th one because this was one of my favorites. I also really liked the 10th one, but yeah, definitely some of my favorite kids books. And then of course the book that all 90s kids loved, Captain Underpants. I mean, like, what person my age didn't read Captain Underpants as a child? And then lastly, I have a series that's for slightly older readers, so maybe like 10 or 11, and that is the Charlie Bone series. Just a warning, this is going to sound a lot like Harry Potter, and it's not but it is really enjoyable. So essentially, in this story, the main character is named Charlie Bone, and he discovers that he has this very specific magical ability. And he's forced by his family to attend this boarding school in his town where a lot of other students have very specific abilities. So it's not like magic powers like in the Harry Potter world, but it's very specific abilities. Like one person can touch an article of clothing and know where that article of clothing has been. Charlie himself can kind of go inside pictures and paintings, so it's really interesting, and I really loved it as a kid. I never finished the series, but I keep meaning to go back and finish it. So now moving on to question number 4, which is Double Shot of Espresso. Name a book that kept you on the edge of your seat from start to finish, and for this one, it was a really obvious choice. I chose Don't Look Back by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Quite simply, I couldn't put this book down. I started it at like 2:30 in the morning the night before I had a couple presentations, and the next thing I knew it was 5 a.m. and I should have been in bed hours before, and I had to put it down, and then I picked it back up the next day as soon as I could and finished it. It was just really engrossing, and I was constantly trying to figure out what was going on, and it really kept me on the edge of my seat. Overall, this book was just really engrossing and quickly pulled me out of the reading slump that I was in. So moving on to question number 5, which is Starbucks. Name a book that is everywhere. And this is one of the easiest ones on the list because if you have a booktube channel that's centered around YA, and possibly even if it's not centered around YA, you have probably mentioned this book at some point. Maybe you've read it, maybe you haven't, maybe you have a really positive opinion on it, maybe you have a really negative opinion on it, but you've probably at least either mentioned it or heard of it, and that is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I feel like I've seen this book on almost every single booktube channel that I've watched. A lot of people have really positive opinions on it. I've seen a lot of people with really negative opinions on it. I just have seen it everywhere, regardless of people's opinions on the book or whether or not they've even read it. I've also seen a lot of channels where they have the book and just haven't read it yet. Question number 6 is That Hipster Coffee Shop. Give a book by an indie author a shout out. And the author I'm going to mention is both traditionally and independently published, and that is Beth Revis. Specifically, the book I'm going to mention is The Body Electric by Beth Revis, which is her independently published book. She also has a new book coming out next month, and I'm not sure if that one is self-published or traditionally published, but I just love Beth Revis, and my singular favorite book by her is The Body Electric. It's a really interesting, fast-paced sci-fi dystopian novel that I think a lot of people who like the Lunar Chronicles will also enjoy. So if you have never read The Body Electric by Beth Revis or you've never checked out her books, I would definitely recommend it. I really do think that fans of the Lunar Chronicles will really love Beth Revis's books. Question number 7 is Oops, I Accidentally Got Decaf. Name a book that you expected more from. And I mean, what even is the point anymore if you get decaf coffee? Like, you've taken away the point of coffee. Anyway, I digress. The book that I chose for this was Armada by Ernest Cline. I love Ready Player One. It is one of my absolute favorite books. And I didn't hate Armada by Ernest Cline, but I just didn't get what I was expecting. It wasn't bad. I think I gave it 3 stars out of 5 or like 7 out of 10, so I didn't hate it by any means, but I just thought that after Ready Player One, this was a much more bland, much less interesting book. I think that he started out with a really great concept. I was really excited about picking it up when I heard the premise, but I think that he didn't deliver on the really interesting premise. I don't know, I just didn't enjoy it as much as I'd hoped to, so it definitely did not live up to my expectations. And finally, we're to the last question. Question number 8 is The Perfect Blend. Name a series that was both bitter and sweet, but ultimately satisfying. And once again, I could go with Harry Potter, which is the most obvious choice, but I decided to get away from that just a little bit and go with my other all-time favorite series, which is the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. This series just gives you all of the feels, whether happy or sad or in between. It's just an amazing, well-rounded trilogy, and I gave all of the books 5 stars out of 5. All 3 of them are amazing. They're really intricately woven. They're just really awesome, and also both bitter and sweet. Like, when I finished book 3, I threw it. Like, I didn't know how to feel about the trilogy. I was just consumed by emotions, and I couldn't figure out what they were. It's just an amazing, amazing trilogy, and I love it so much. And like I said, both bitter and sweet. So that's it for the coffee book tag. This is a slightly older tag, so I'm not sure who has and hasn't done it, but I'm gonna go ahead and tag anyone who has read books within the Cosmere. Not necessarily the Stormlight Archive, but if you've read any of his adult works, which are all set within the Cosmere, you are tagged to do the coffee book tag. As always, I will leave links down in the description to my blog, Twitter, and Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I would love to be friends with all of you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!